All right, I'm back. I just made the other episode. Just gonna make another episode right back to back here because I had a crazy trade idea that I want to show. I'm probably gonna pull the trigger on that. I didn't want to make the episode too long there, so just talked about, if you didn't watch the last episode, the whole roster, just the whole plan or whatever for this year. How we're 32-8, kind of going all in. So as since we're gonna be so bad the next few years and kind of like total rebuild, I want to make sure I went all in this season because probably not going to be good for a long time. And I did regret not making a big deadline deal to get one or two more pieces. That could have been the difference. I didn't want to lose in like the second or third round and be like, oh, that like 113-14 rated upgrade would have been the difference. So looking at our roster, and again, don't forget that we have a 13 rated power forward here, and then Dolphy's actually a third liner to replace Conrad. So looking at the roster, the only weakness would be like that fourth line. And I know most teams' fourth lines aren't very good, but this team especially, like, I don't even think this fourth line's like playable in the playoffs. So I'll probably literally give all top three lines like 18, 19 minutes and play the last line like 2, 3 minutes as it is. So the and again, I don't really want to change much. These top 12 guys have literally all been together for 3 years. It's been nuts. Waz, Prada, and Andolfi were the fourth line, and then they moved up third line this year because McDonald and Peterson moved on. These guys were the fourth line when they're all 17, or third line, I guess, and then they moved up this year to the second line, and then this guy's been the second line for like 2 years now, and then again they moved up a line. So everyone just moved up. Peterson, McDonald left or whatever, and Whitmer last year was a 19-year-old. So everyone just moved up. So all these guys have literally started for 3 years and all in the same line combination. So it's been crazy. So this fourth line here is got that fifth round pick I talked about last episode, who's a really solid 17-year-old that I rostered last year, and he's been around for last year and this year and is really solid. Got a good future. And then the 16-year-old first round pick's a stud, Witheridge. If you look, Witheridge is definitely the best young player. I think talked about him quite a bit last episode. He's got the best shot on my team for a young guy. Would have been probably will be the best player in the team for a couple of years here if I keep him. But again, I think the move here is to go all in. So I hadn't really thought of much, and first thing I came across, so I had pretty much like the worst team in the league in the East, team that's in last place, kind of giving up on the season, is Hamilton. And this trade just makes way too much sense not to do. So I first looked at their team and I sorted by the best players and saw a couple of 19-year-olds. So again, that's a last place team with two really solid 19-year-olds. I almost traded for this guy last year, if you remember. I talked about it a couple episodes ago. I wanted to trade for him last year for the playoff run because he's a sick defender. Would have been like a sweet third line guy. And then he's like a first line guy in most teams, but for how stacked I was, I thought he'd be a perfect shutdown defender and good guy. I didn't end up pulling the trigger. I thought it'd be a bit. I went for Cooper instead, that D man. So he's back as 19-year-old on the last place team. So his value wouldn't be as crazy this year since he only has the half season rental. So last year you would have had to pay a lot more because he was 18. So you would have had him for like a really good player for 2 years. So he's a 19-year-old, and then they also have this Delgaro guy who was a former first round pick. Delgaro is their first line center, getting well over a point a game on the last place team, 20 goals, 50 points already. He's a beast. So they have two really top notch 19-year-olds, and then their right winger on that first line is also a pretty cool 19-year-old. He is Natty. He's 6'1", 200, good defensive player that's like a 11 rated, kind of like a grinder type and a back checker. So I was thinking that'd be like a cool fourth line guy, 19-year-old to bring in. Again, because my like fourth line guys are like 17-year-old, like 7-8 rated, right? So it'd be cool to bring in a guy with experience. So the crazy thing is that's that first line for them. So if you look at their team other than that, so they lose both those 19-year-olds, and they're already last place, so the season's kind of like gone already. They lose him, so they got the one good 18-year-old back next season, a really good D-man. And then they got this really good Russian winger back who's 18. He'll be a first line type guy. And then they have this amazing 17-year-old. He's like their stud young player, probably a high pick. Has a ton of high rating already at 17. So he'll be a big time goal scorer, big hitter, good defender. He'll be a good player for 2 years. And then they have this good lefty back. And then they also have and then they have a couple 19-year-olds. So they also have this really good 17-year-old goalie, like big time potential. He was probably a really high pick. So yeah, see, that's one of those glitches. He was sixth pick in the WHL, and it's like a free agent. But I figure they all just kind of match teams, so it kind of evens out in the end. So yeah, anyways, they got a bunch of cool, another good 17-year-old 3-star potential. So I figured that would be a perfect team to load up on 17-year-olds because they have two 19-year-olds that are kind of useless that aren't back next year and they're in last place. And then what I want to do is trade them. I want to do a huge blockbuster. I want to get both of those guys. And that's the other thing. You don't just trade for a good player, but then you're trading for a good player that has chemistry with the other guys. So they have good chemistry together. already. So then it's like, instead of just bringing a new guy with surrounding, you keep them on the same line and they already have chemistry. So you're bringing in guys with good chemistry. And what I was thinking would be absolutely nuts is to bring those two guys in and have them on like the fourth line, or probably end up moving this line down to the fourth line, and then having Camp and the other guys the third line with that 19-year-old grinder type guy. So then I would just like replace an entire line and have an insane, because I have an insane top 12. So top 12, top three lines. So that would just make me absolutely stacked. So you would take a first place team and you would bring in two really good 19-year-olds, the two best players on this team, and the good 19-year-old role player grinder, and make them the new third line. So that would be crazy. So what I was thinking is, I think it would make way too much sense not to do, because, like I said, if you look at their team, that would be like a soft rebuild, because they would just, all they'd be doing is trading the top 19-year-olds that are all gone next year anyways, and they would still keep all their good 17-year-olds, and then I would trade them my two top young players. So I would give them both my young forwards. So I'd give him Basetto, who's a 5th-round pick, but he's 17. And if I'll go back to the roster in a second, but he would literally be like their first line center the rest of the season on the last place team. And he'd be like a first, second line center the next 2 seasons, because he'd be all like green stuff in a year, like all 12, 13s. And really good player. I wouldn't really want to trade him, because he'd probably be like my first line center for a couple seasons on some bad teams. But this trade is just too hard to pass up, because it's too perfect. I'm giving up a guy that's like barely plays on the fourth line for like a stud, like 19-year-old. So I would give up Basetto, who's going to be an absolute stud for them. And then they have a really good left winger. That's the one thing. They don't have like a 17-year-old center, right? Because if you go back to their team, their last place, what do they have if you go by position? They only have that 19-year-old, and then look at this, all half-star shit, like 19-year-olds and stuff. So they have absolutely nothing at center after that. So what I would do is I would trade them that and my first round pick center, who I moved to right wing here, was a 20 rated center. So this guy's even better. So I would give them an elite talent first round pick, 16-year-old, who is definitely my future goal scorer on this team. Who's probably a guy that could score 30 goals. He's got a crazy shot, crazy getting open rating, really good skater. Going to be all like 13 skating in a year or two. So that would give them two top-notch 17-year-olds to pair with all those good 17-year-olds they have. They got the lefty, they got the really good goalie, and then they got this left winger that's a 3-star here, Cadeau or whatever. And then they have this. Oh, I didn't even talk about this guy. Yeah, that's the main piece. Is this guy? This guy is like their best player under 19. So they have the elite center, the left wing, and then they'd get my two stud centers to pair with all these guys. They have the two good left wingers, and then they'd have this really good right winger. So they'd have an elite, like 5 top-notch 17-year-olds. So they'd be an absolute force in 2 years. So there'd be a soft rebuild for them, giving up two 19-year-olds, getting two top 17-year-olds. And then since those 19-year-olds are so good, I figured I had to give up a little bit more. I think it would be definitely only fair if I gave up just like, I'm going to be so fucked in the future. I'm giving up everything. But it's just that trade's way too hard not to make, because those two 19-year-olds will really put me over the top. I think I'll give up my second round for next year, and I'll give up a third round this year, and I could even give up like a future second or third, because that would be a big time trade. Getting like one of the best 19-year-old centers on the trade block, an elite 19-year-old winger with 17 positioning. So like I said, if you just think about that team, bringing those two guys in, they're all of a sudden, I can get rid of those two guys. I'm trading those two guys and replacing them with the 3 19-year-old lines. And then Mathis kind of hit the bench and be a really good bench player. It's like a 9-10 rated defensive guy with like 12 defensive read. And then you have this really good line here. Could just be the third line or the fourth line or whatever. And then those new guys would probably be like the new third line. And then these guys would move down. So it'd make a pretty fourth liner and just have 4 sick lines and like rotate them all like equal minutes, because all 4 lines would be so good. That top line's a little better than the rest, so you could probably give them a few extra minutes, but they'd be the power play anyways and stuff. So that would just make my team just insane, because I'm already at 38 wins. Sorry, 32 and 8. So if I did that, my future's so crazy. So I'm losing him and him. So I literally have no good centers next year except for the 2 I'd probably end up trading. So literally at the end of the year, like Alec would be my best center. The guy who was like 8 defensive read. And then, yeah, I'd be losing Witheridge and Facetto. So it's like I would absolutely have nothing for like these next like 3 years. And I would probably be the worst team in the league next year. I could probably trade these two guys, and Maynard and Wolf, and literally, yeah, like I said, just win like probably like 20 games and get the first pick of the draft and just do a full rebuild, get an elite top 5 pick in the import draft as a 17-year-old, get a top 5 pick 16-year-old, and just be terrible for 2 years and hopefully do like a full out rebuild and get a couple of top picks. I can replace these if I do end up trading these two young good centers and like a second round pick and a third round pick. I can recoup those by trading Maynard next season. I would trade Maynard for like definitely he'd be like one of the best 19-year-olds in the league next year. So I trade him for like a second bunch of future seconds or something like that, and get 2 or 3 of them or whatever. And so I think that's the move. I think I'm going to pull the trigger on this trade. I'm going to do those 2 centers, and then I'm getting that kind of crappy old 19-year-old, so I could flip someone for him or whatever. Maybe throw in Heap or something. So again, I'm just going to be so bad next year. He's just another guy that will kind of contribute for Hamilton next year's 19-year-old. Be a solid like third, fourth line winger, just kind of like the same as the guy I'm getting back this year as a 19-year-old. Just be flipping a 19-year-old for an 18-year-old. So because then they get 3 guys that are all back next year and those 2 good young centers. So yeah, I think that's the trade. We'll do Heap, those 2 centers, second and a third, and we're gonna get back those 2 19-year-olds. So that's the trade. And then yeah, next episode hopefully we'll be in the playoffs and hopefully number 1 seed and rolling.